What's the number one mistake that students and parents for that matter make when making their college list? This is the time of year when I ask my juniors to start making their college list. I know it's early, it seems early. It's only February, but I ask them to get it done early because there's a lot of things that they don't take into consideration. When I see kids making college lists in the summer, it's July, it's August, and they're saying, I'm going to make a college list, or I want to add this school or add this school, and they just start thinking about it only in the summer. I think that's really late. When you make a college list, especially now, we have a lot of schools that are test optional, and it's a little bit of a different situation right now. But even if it weren't, I think it's important to start early because that will decide, for a lot of kids whether you should take the SAT. It'll decide, what kind of recommendations you need, and it'll decide whether and how to start your history of correspondence with those schools. History of correspondence is very important. This is something that I covered in a previous video, but the sooner you start a history of correspondence with the school, the better. But you can't do that if you're doing that in August. You can't go visit the school because you don't have time, for example. So the earlier that you have your college list, the better. But every single year, and for the past 14 years, I've seen people make this mistake. The number one biggest mistake that students make in making their college list is they don't have enough safety schools. Everybody wants to apply to schools, and there's nothing wrong with this. Nothing wrong with applying to schools that are dream schools or what they think are target schools. But the problem is a lot of times I see students making their college list and they put down as safety schools what I consider barely target schools. And when I say barely, I mean I'm not even sure if they can get into that school, but they think it's a target school because they're only going off of statistics based on audience that they see at their school, or they say, this I got this GPA and this SAT, and I'm kind of in that mix, and so it's a slam dunk. I can get into that school. Let me tell you, there's no slam dunk. I mean, there are very few slam dunks when it comes to college admissions. There are certainly some, but those slam dunks, the real slam dunks, are safety schools. And I think a lot of times students have the wrong idea about which schools are actually slam dunk safety schools. So, and this, I can't just give you a blanket statement on this. I mean, I can't just say, oh, this is a safety school and this is a safety school for everybody, because it's not. It depends on your GPA. It depends on your scores, your standardized test scores, and everything like that. But primarily on GPA and standardized test scores. And if they're pretty low, some schools that are safety schools for some kids are not going to be for you. So I don't want to give any school names and say this is, but maybe I'll give some examples. All right. So if a student has let's just talk about something in Maryland. So if a student has a 3.5 GPA, and that's not bad, but there are so many students who are outstanding, especially in Maryland, and especially in Howard County and Montgomery County and places like these, and some of these private schools around here. There's just so many outstanding students that a 3.5 doesn't really stand out, right? And so let's say you have a 3.5, nothing wrong with that. You got 3.5, and you have about a 1300 SAT. Let's say you got 1300, 1350 SAT. That's probably pretty common. If you're getting about 3.5, I see kids getting 1300, 1350. And it's not due to lack of intelligence or anything. I think it's mostly due to lack of discipline and lack of effort. But be it as it may, so let's say a student has about 3.5 and about 1300, and they're thinking, man, everybody gets into College Park, everybody gets into University of Maryland, so that's going to be a safety school for me. You don't know how many students I hear who say that, who say College Park is, I'll get in there. There's no problem with that. So I don't even know if I should apply to UMBC or Towson University or schools like these. And I always say, no, you need to apply to UMBC, you need to apply to Towson University and some other safety schools, okay? College Park is not a walk in the park. Pardon the pun. It's not a walk in the park. It really isn't. It has become more and more difficult every year, in my observation. It wasn't like 15 years ago. It wasn't even like 10 years ago. I see kids who get very high SAT and GPAs get rejected from College Park. probably 6, 7 years ago was the first time I saw people get rejected from UMBC, and everybody considered that just a walk-in school. It's not anymore. So I would say to those kids, let's say a 3.5, 1350 SAT or 1300 SAT kid, I would say, don't assume that College Park is going to be a safety school. That might be a target school, okay? Okay, it's just, but you might not get into that school even. You got to apply to UMBC, you have to apply to Towson University, and you have to apply to other schools that are easier to get in than College Park, like Penn State or University of Pittsburgh, for example. State, maybe Michigan State University. There are a lot of schools, and there's a lot of great schools. And I say every year that the quote problem with going to college in America is that there are too many good schools. Okay, even when I'm helping parents and students make their college list, it's always, man, I could write down 50 schools, but we want to keep it down to, well, there's no certain number, but I'm like, maybe we try to keep it down to 10, maybe 15. And some parents want a lot of schools. So I said, okay, maybe we do 20. But I mean, it's just so many good schools, okay? And just because the school is easier to get into doesn't mean that it's a bad school. This is a misnomer. Do not think this. This is a bad assumption, okay? Just because it's harder to get into doesn't necessarily mean it's a better school. So the number one mistake, a serious mistake that people make, is that they don't have enough safety schools. So make sure you have enough safety schools, because every year I see students get rejected from schools they thought they were going to get into, and they don't have enough safety schools, and they're down to one choice. They don't really have a choice at that point. But let me give you some other mistakes that people make. So the number one mistake I see is that. But another serious mistake is that they pick schools that are not right for them. They're only going off of rank and reputation. They're not looking into the details of what do they offer, what kind of school is it a big school, is it a small school, what's the diversity of it, where is it located, what kind of programs do they have research opportunities, are there internship opportunities close by? I mean, there's so many things you have to consider, and yet they're like, oh, it's ranked number 5, or it's ranked number 15, or this school's ranked 52, so I don't like it. It's not based on rank and reputation. It has to fit you. Let me just give you an example. Years ago, I had this student. She wasn't one of my students, but she was a sister of one of my students. And so the mom called me and says, can you help my older daughter? And I said, well, she's already in college, right? And she says, yeah, but her grade point, GPA is very low. And I said, what school is she going to? She says she's going to Loyola. Loyola University here in Baltimore is a liberal arts school, okay? And she was a physics major, and she wanted to go work at NASA. She wanted to go work in aerospace, and she was really passionate about that and everything. And so I met her, and I said, "What's the problem?" She says, "Well, my teachers, I have to write all these papers, and in fact, I have another paper due in a month, and it's about history, it's about the Korean War." And I said, "Isn't it weird that you're a physics major and you have to write papers in your second year on the Korean War?" She says, "Yeah, I don't know why they keep doing this. I don't know why they keep, having me read books and take these classes like this." And I said, "You understand that your school is a liberal arts school, right?" She didn't know what that was. And when I told her mom, I told her that Loyola was a liberal arts school, she didn't know what that was. And I said, "Why did you make the decision to have your daughter go here?" And I asked the students the same thing. "Why did you decide to go here?" I mean, it was a great campus. We came here, and the kids were nice, and it was sort of an urban environment, but it wasn't like real city. She was giving me all these reasons, and they were all the wrong reasons. That was a liberal arts school. And in case you don't know what a liberal arts school is, it's a different sort of category of school. When you go to a liberal arts school, you should really love reading and writing. If you don't, you should not go to a liberal arts school. If you're really terrible at it, you should not go to a liberal arts school, because the liberal arts school is chock full of all 4 years of reading a lot and writing a lot. And it doesn't matter what your major is, you're going to still read a lot and write a lot. So be careful of liberal arts schools, okay? And some of the highest ranked colleges in America, some of the most difficult schools to graduate from and get an A in, are liberal arts school, like Amherst and Bryn Mawr and Swarthmore and on and on and on and on. There are many, many, many liberal arts schools, and they're excellent schools for people who are into the liberal arts, okay? Now, it doesn't mean that if you're a science major or a physics major that you can't go to liberal arts school. So, Because some kids love physics, but they love reading and writing. Now, those kids is fine, but this particular student wasn't like that. She was a physics major, but hated reading and writing. That was just not her thing. So her GPA was so low, I said, you can't keep attending this school. She says, no, what can I do? I'm in my second year. I said, you got to transfer. So I had her transfer to UMBC, and then she did well. You know, her GPA went up a lot, and she went on, okay, with her life. So you have to pick schools that are right for you. And I'm not just talking about liberal arts versus non-liberal arts schools. There are some schools that just aren't right for you. Even if you got in, even if you were able to get in, somehow you got in, you may not do very well in that school. So you have to understand that. You know, so when you're looking at schools, don't just look at rank and reputation. Look at the programs, look at the rigor, look how to, you know, like for example, I was an engineer, so I'll just say there are some schools that are easier to graduate with an engineering degree in than others. Okay, if you're going to a school like Carnegie Mellon, if you're going to a school like Georgia Tech, they're hard. Okay, not that I've gone there. I went to University of Washington, but I've had students and I know colleagues and people who have gone. It's difficult. It's difficult to get an A. They will work your butt off, and so Carnegie Mellon, you know, and MIT, for example, right? And if you go to Georgia Tech, those schools are going to be much more difficult, and it's going to when I say difficult, they're difficult in grading. They're difficult. The professors cover a lot of ground. They go very, very quickly. They're not very empathetic. They're just, come on, you got to go. You know, they expect you to keep up. But let's say you went to engineering school at UMBC or Virginia Tech. Not as difficult. Now, I'm not saying it's a walk in the park. Again, I know kids who dropped out of UMBC engineering because they couldn't keep up. It's not easy. But there are some schools that are harder, okay? And so you just have to know that. And you have to pick schools that are good for you. Okay, let me give you another thing that people underestimate and make a mistake on every single year. They don't take into consideration financial aid. They don't take into consideration the economic influence of whatever school they're going to go to. So they pick schools that they're, you know, again, rank and reputation. They pick all these schools, and then they get their financial aid award, you know, award letter back in March, and they say, whoa, this school's going to cost me $60,000. I can't pay 60. I don't want to go into student loan. I don't want to get into debt that much. And the parents are very surprised, and they haven't picked enough public schools and public schools in state that would have been much cheaper to attend. They didn't pick enough of those. And so in the end, again, they're only left with one choice because they didn't have enough schools that would have been less expensive to attend. Now, unless you are one of those parents and one of those students with parents who have a lot of money. Now, I have a lot of parents like that of my students. And in their families, money is not really an issue because it doesn't matter wherever my kid wants to go. If they get in, we'll pay for it. We already have a 529 plan set up, or we don't have a 529 plan, but the parents make so much money, it doesn't really matter. They'll go wherever they want to go. Well, in those cases, it doesn't really matter. The money doesn't factor in. But for most families in America, this does matter. And so the cheapest schools that you can go to are the ones that you can commute to from your house that are public schools, okay? Unless you get full ride scholarships, and so which are not easy to get. So, you know, if you're living in a wherever you're living, if you have a college, a university that you can commute to, and I consider like an hour drive or less commutable, okay? And in my college career, when I was in college, the first 2 years I lived in the dorms, and the last 2 years I commuted. And I can tell you the experience was really no different. Okay, everybody talks about, oh, but I want to get the college experience. Look, you don't want to go into debt. That's what you want to do. You don't want to get a big pile of student loans that you have to repay after 4 years. And so that's much more important. You can get the full, college experience even if you commute. Let me tell you. But if you commute from home, the reason I say that is that'll reduce your college expenses by about 50%. It's huge. And so you commute from home and you go to a public university, you're close to your house. That's going to be the cheapest way to go to college. Like I said, unless you have a full ride scholarship. These are the three biggest mistakes that people make that I've seen over the years when making their college list. So I hope this was helpful, and thanks for watching, and I'll see you in my next video.